May I have your attention, please? The driver of XA8304. Your vehicle is parked in the place where the Prime Minister of St. Lucia will be parking this evening. We'd like to ask you to move your vehicle, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to stand as we acknowledge the arrival and the presence of the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, a former principal of the University of the West Indies, Professor the Most Honorable Eugene Barrow, Principal of the UWI and Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Clive Landis, senior members of management of the faculty of the University of the West Indies, President of the DLP, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, members of the councils of the Democratic Labour Party and the general membership, Dr. H. Leon, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Ms. Andrea Powers, Senior Advisor to the President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Sir Richard Cheltenham, Dame Maisie Barker Welch. We welcome you all this evening, and we start first with the playing of the national anthems of Barbados and St. Lucia. Please remain standing. As it is traditional to start with prayer, I invite Mr. Matthew Thorne to come to the microphone.
Good evening. It is a good night to have a great night. Isaiah 46:9 reminds us, and it says, "Remember the things I have done in the past, for I am God alone. I am God and there is none like me." May I invite you to pray as we continue in worship and just give God the honor and the due that is worthy to his name. Heavenly Father, we give thanks for life, for health, and for strength. Thank you for the abundance of your love, which fuels us, keeps us, and has been restoring past relationships with each other, this great party, and this country. Yahweh God, I ask you that you bless and abundantly multiply the resources of every person present tonight. I ask that you put a hedge of protection around them, and I pray, O God, that you bring them into a deeper relationship of the mysteries of your reality. I declare and I decree increase and abundance in their health, finances, their homes, their businesses, and their jobs. Holy Spirit, let this atmosphere be infused by your shalom, and I pray that you saturate us tonight, Jehovah God. As we set out to give you honor, where honor is due, and to execute that which we have planned this evening. For your word encourages us to submit our plans to you, and you will see them through to your honor and to your glory, according to Job 42:2. Psalms 24 reads, "The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas and established it in the waters. Who may ascend to the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who doesn't trust in idols or swear by a false god." It says that they will receive blessings from the Lord and vindication from God their Savior. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, God of Jacob. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. So I say, lift up your heads, Democratic Labour Party. Lift up your heads, Barbados. Lift up your heads, individuals here tonight. And again I ask, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. He is the King of glory. So Holy Spirit, I ask that you come and you operate as you see fit tonight. And may your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen. I bless you all. Thank you.
You may be seated. Thank you, Matthew. Indeed, we extend a very warm welcome to all members of the Diplomatic Corps, to our awardees assembled this evening, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is good that we could gather here this evening in this institutional center, which bears the name of the Right Honorable, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, National Hero, on an occasion when we have yet another lecture. Lectures which started just about year 2006 to commemorate the memory of the first Prime Minister of Barbados, and an occasion upon which his inspiration for all, irrespective of their walks of life, to be people proud and industrious. And among them, we will be publicly acknowledging those who we will be awarding this evening. It is at this time I'd like to invite to the podium, with her welcoming remarks, Mrs. Irene Sandiford Garner.
Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philippe Jean-Pierre, Dame Maisie Barker-Welch, Sir Richard Cheltenham, former Principal of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, Professor the Most Honorable Udine Barito, Principal of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, and Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Clive Landis, Deputy Principal of the University of the West Indies, Professor Winston Moore, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Hyginus Leon, and the Assistant to the President, Ms. Andrea Power, President of the Democratic Labour Party, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, members of the Council of the Democratic Labour Party and the general membership, members of the Diplomatic Corps, awardees, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I consider it an honor to welcome you all this evening to the Errol Barrow Lecture and Awards Ceremony. It is indeed heartwarming to see so many of you here. on this Friday evening. Your presence is an illustration of your sacrifice in making an effort to attend an event on what we all know is a busy Friday evening. All precursors to public holidays in Barbados are frantic, busy evenings. It is also testimony to your respect to our founding father, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, respect for our institution, the Democratic Labour Party, and respect for our selection of honorees and the choice of our esteemed guest speaker. This lecture series was conceptualized by the party almost 20 years ago to honor our political father's memory and to give expression to the various views of national, regional, even international developmental perspectives. Former presenters, and I'm listing them in no particular order, have included former Prime Minister of Barbados, the late David Thompson, and former Prime Minister, the Honorable Frondel Stewart, former party leader Verla de Pisa, our current leader, Dr. Ronnie Yarwood, retired Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of the West Indies Cayfield campus, the Most Honorable Eugene Barrow, the former third Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, the late Sir Roy Marshall, Dr. Lowell Lewis, former Chief Minister of Montserrat, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Sir George Allen, Dr. Monrell Williams, Dr. Don Marshall, economist Jeremy Stevens, Dr. Pedro Welch, the late Sir Frank Allen, and Sir Sridhar Rampal, and these are just a few. Tomorrow evening, Professor Dr. Richard Drayton will be delivering the Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture to our diaspora members in the United Kingdom. So, Sir Richard Cheltenham, you're the only one missing. So I say to tonight's presenter, the Honorable Philip Jean-Pierre, sir, you are in exemplary company. I'm convinced that your topic will give great pleasure to our political ancestor, who, like you, was an unwavering champion of CARICOM. Our awardees span the gamut of trade unionism, entertainment, sports, and community service. All have been born with unique talents and skills. None of what they have contributed to this country was learned. They may have honed their abilities, but each one was born with a special talent. And tonight I say congratulations to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, all I will say now again is that the Democratic Labour Party welcomes you to what will be an intellectually and emotionally stimulating evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Irene Sandiford Garner. Irene made mention of Sir Frank Allen earlier. I invite us now to pause in a moment of remembrance. Sir Frank recently passed, and so this is dedicated to a gentleman, a former economist, educator, and one who dedicated much of his life to the advancement of Barbados. May he rest in peace. It is now my pleasure to invite to the microphone to deliver his remarks the principal of the University of the West Indies, Professor Clive Landis.
Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philip Jean-Pierre, former principal of UWI, my good friend, Professor the Most Honorable Eugene Barrow, senior members of management of the faculty of the University of the West Indies, President of the DLP, also my colleague, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, members of the councils of the DLP and the general membership, members of the diplomatic corps, awardees, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant good evening to all. It is my great honor to welcome everyone here this evening to the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination to attend the Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture, given by our distinguished speaker, the Honorable Philippe Jean-Pierre, Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I should say that my wife is a St. Lucian on her mother's side, so I have a special fondness for St. Lucia. And should I say, welcome back, your alma mater. This evening's event follows closely on the heels of our 60th anniversary launch parade, in which hundreds of students, staff, and the whole Cave Hill community paraded through the campus today. In fact, when you came in, if you heard the music, the students are still celebrating. During the press launch for the 60th anniversary, I had the opportunity to share the words of wisdom spoken by Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Errol Walton Barrow, that he gave to the Cave Hill graduating class of 1968. In that address, he shared his vision for what this new Indigenous university should become. In the first place, he posited, and I quote, "As a settled conviction that the efficient growth of the university is almost the only path to prosperity," end quote. He further elaborated on the service ethos that is required of a public university by saying, and I quote again, it is of the utmost importance that our statesmen and scholars, students and scientists should all realize that a university institution cannot survive unless it has as its constant goal service to the communities which support and sustain its activities, end quote. The need to constantly evolve as a university to serve the needs of society is well understood by the Cave Hill campus, a point that was echoed again in the remarks by Prime Minister, the Honorable Mir Omar Motley, at the launch yesterday. The university constantly reforms its curriculum to meet society's needs, with our newest offerings tending to shift more towards more applied degrees, like the Diploma in Health Policy and Health Systems, shorter degrees, like the Certificate in Digital Marketing, and very short online courses, like the Certificate in Teaching Skills for Effective Teaching, specially designed for busy teachers who can complete this flexible program spending just 3 hours per week online over a 2-month period. And in terms of our research as an academy, a whole strategy of 2022 to 2027 is geared towards translating our research into tangible value through entrepreneurship and innovation. The Cave Hill 2022 to 2027 strategy is themed Creating Value from Our Ideas, as we seek to translate our strengths in research into creating value for society, but also not forgetting to create value for the university itself. Let me conclude my remarks by citing just one example from one faculty to exemplify what we mean by creating value from our ideas. It seems only fitting to choose the Faculty of Law on this occasion of the memorial lecture for Errol Barrow, himself a lawyer, while we are in the presence of an eminent lawyer who heads his political party. A budding entrepreneurial venture in the Faculty of Law is the establishment of a Center for Alternative Dispute Resolution, This is a for-profit venture that we are seeking to approve at the March meeting of the Cave Hill Campus Council. It is a perfect example of creating value from our ideas, as the ideas and expertise reside in our faculty, notably in the person of Deputy Dean Antonius Hippolyte, who is leading the venture, interestingly a St. Lucian. But the output creates value in society by helping to address a pressing need to ease the backlog of cases in our law courts. And of course, this is a commercial venture intended to create value for the university itself. In this, our 60th year, you will witness this evolution of the Cave Hill campus towards a more entrepreneurial university as we replicate this paradigm across every faculty, working in tandem with the private sector and civil society and government to create value from our ideas. I thank you for indulging me with these slightly extended welcome remarks on behalf of the Cave Hill campus. My excuse is, it is our birthday.
Thank you, Professor Clive Landis, the principal of the University of the West Indies. I must admit to having been tickled somewhat pink when it was whispered in my ear that there was someone parked in the wrong spot. Prime Minister, it would be interesting to note that you would have overcome the challenges of interregional travel, arrived at Grantley Adams International Airport, be ferried to the University of the West Indies, and then have the problems of not being able to park. I could just imagine the roundup of the OECS news tomorrow of such. Thankfully, we got it under control. And so it makes it that much easier for Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, the president of the Democratic Labour Party, to come to the microphone and give you a truly warm welcome to Barbados.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Protocol having been established, I am honored in my role as president of the Democratic Labour Party, one of the oldest institutions and one of the oldest political institutions in the Caribbean, born out of the mind and heart of the great Errol Walton Barrow, the father of independence, World War II hero, chef, pilot, lawyer, politician, sailor, lawyer, man of letters. I am convinced there was nothing that he couldn't do. And it is more warming to welcome you to the Errol Barrow Memorial Center, which bears his name, and to introduce our esteemed speaker, the Honorable Philip, and I'm going to get this right, Joseph Pierre, because it seems the whole night we were renaming him John. So, Joseph. Barrow always said, and Yusuf Hanif wrote it, that Caribbean people have the capacity to solve their own problems. In 1973, at the founding of CARICOM, whose 50th anniversary we celebrate this year, he stated, however, that we have been a people who've been endued with a sense of our own inadequacy. And at that meeting, Barrow, in his typical, direct, yet thoughtful style, disclosed that he had written a letter to the Prime Minister of Guyana, Burnham, in 1965 to establish a free trade area between Barbados and Guyana. He would disclose that in that letter he made some rather caustic observations about the failure of Caribbean leadership to get together in any meaningful way to develop the Caribbean. He was to observe in 1986 that regional integration is a lived reality for many, many Caribbean people, but we fail to use our collective wisdom to make it that reality at the political and the leadership level. We say it is time, we say it is time, we say it is time. How many times have we said it is time? But if history is any lesson, the way And the way to deal with this, we must acknowledge that we as a people, we can solve our problems. And though we have said it's time a million times, it is time that we get our act together and make the regional integration dream a lived reality. The reality that Barrow spoke so eloquently about, the reality that he envisaged in the formation of CARICOM. As Michael Manley was to write of Barrow, he said he understood, as does the party that he created, that social justice must rest upon economic foundations if we are to have real, decent lives and we are to live out our dreams. And that is why economic integration is key for the development not only of the Caribbean, but it is key for the development of every single country in the Caribbean and for every citizen of the Caribbean. In introducing Philip Joseph Pierre as our very special guest, allow me to invoke one more truth of Barrow, one that I share and one which I believe and I know in my heart that the Prime Minister of St. Lucia shares, as made real in the story I will read to you. And it makes him exactly the sort of leader that the Caribbean requires at this moment. In 1973, at the formation of CARICOM, and I want us to listen carefully to this, Barrow said, neither one of us, neither the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Prime Minister of Guyana, or I had any ambitions to be Prime Minister. We had ambitions at that time to see an integrated Caribbean. Today, I hear young aspiring political contenders stating they want to be a Prime Minister, as if being a Prime Minister is like taking an exam, and once you achieve the pass mark, you're automatically a Prime Minister. End quote. The Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre is the 9th Prime Minister of St. Lucia, an office he's held since July 28, 2021, having led the St. Lucia Labour Party to a landslide victory on a People's First agenda. The Honorable Pierre holds a bachelor's degree in economics with honors along with a master's in business administration from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. And also, he's held portfolios in finance, economic development, and youth economy in St. Lucia. In addition, he's the chairman of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and chairman of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank and chairman for the National Security and Law Enforcement of CARICOM. An experienced business consultant, qualified economist, and committed parliamentarian representative, he has proudly served the constituency of Castries East for more than 25 years, making him one of the elder statesmen of not only St. Lucia, but the Caribbean. Previously, the Prime Minister has served as Minister of Tourism, Civil Aviation, and International Financial Services from 1997 to 2000. He served as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure, Port Services, and Transport from 2011 to 2016, and Leader of the Opposition from 2016 to 2021. A modest leader, but one with a profound intellect, the Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre, the attributes, his core values, a system of honesty, empathy, and determination from his humble beginnings to create not only a better life for himself, but for all others around him is something that we should salute and something that we should honor. His mother, a devoted teacher, and father, a hardworking policeman, impressed upon him these virtues which would be his guiding compass for his outstanding career. A product of St. Lucia, a son of CARICOM, a product of the University of the West Indies, and despite the circumstances, a faithful fan of the West Indies cricket team. It is with that that I welcome my colleague, my friend, my comrade, the Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre, to deliver the Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ewan. Allow me to say good night to the St. Lucians. Can I say bonsoir tout le monde? It's an honor to be here, particularly in my old school. I see youth in here. Yeah. Let me thank you, Mr. President, for this really revealing introduction. I hope everybody said was true. I'm honored and privileged to be invited to deliver this year's Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture. Being asked to follow in the footsteps of people like Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, the late Sir Frank Arlene. Incidentally, Frank Arlene taught me agriculture and economics at Caville. Yeah. Professor Eugene Barito, Sir Sridef Rampal, Honorable Flinders Stewart, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Sir George Arlene, Jeremy Stephen is indeed a humongous task to undertake. I thank the organizers of the lecture and leadership of the DLP for inviting me to reflect on the rich contribution and legacy of one of the Caribbean's most outstanding sons, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. It is indeed a singular honor for me to deliver this lecture in honor of a man who helped shape my political evolution and development and belief in Caribbean regionalism. Errol Barrow was a Barbadian by birth, but Caribbean by outlook, and was not constrained by the narrow-mindedness or insularity. He saw himself as a Vincentian or St. Lucian or Trinidadian or Barbadian by birth. In his parting of the ways speech, delivered in the Barbados House of Assembly on January 4, 1966, 10 months before Barbados proceeded to independence, he boldly said, "I'm a West Indian, and there is no one who is more West Indian by birth or by inclination or by otherwise than I am." His West Indianism was further defined when, in keeping with his wishes, his cremated remains were scattered on Barbados in the waters of the Caribbean Sea, a powerful symbolic gesture of his embrace of a Caribbean identity. If there was any doubt as to the value of his contribution to CARICOM, if there is any questioning of the validity of his naming him a champion of CARICOM, these doubts should be swept away by the realization that his regional integration movement, which he helped initiate, has survived for 50 years. That CARICOM, with all its accomplishments and all its weaknesses, will observe 50 years since its founding is a testament to the aspirations and vision of Errol Barrow and the three other leaders, Eric Williams, Michael Manley, and Forbes Burnham, who signed the CARICOM Treaty on 4th July 1973. That 50 years of Caribbean regional integration through CARICOM is an event to be proud of and to be observed with some pomp and ceremony. It's underscored by the fact that CARICOM is the oldest surviving regional integration movement in the developing world. The importance of this anniversary is further emphasized by the sobering reality that 2022 marked 60 years since the collapse of the first attempt at a regional political union, the West Indies Federation, that lasted only 4 years, from 1958 to 1962. Barrow was obviously annoyed at the failure of the Federation, and he observed that, and I quote, "We would never get together in the West Indies until we fashion something of our own." That's from the parting of the ways speech in 1966. It is believed that Barrow regarded the Federation experiment with a measure of contempt and a convenient colonial contraption designed to give Britain a tighter administrative control over its Caribbean countries than to promote genuine development. After the collapse of the Federation, Errol Barrow pushed in 1965 for the first indigenous Caribbean effort at integration, a regional free trade area. That initiative was based on a threefold belief. There was the unshakable belief that he expressed at the first meeting of heads of government of the Commonwealth Caribbean on 22nd July 1963 in Port of Spain. Namely, first, and I quote, "Regional cooperation is something without which we cannot hope to survive." Secondly, that his fellow Caribbean leaders, like Forbes Burnham of Guyana and Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago, still shared this conviction, a conviction that they had first espoused in London as students in the mid-1940s. For it was they who had, and I quote, "staged the first public meeting on Caribbean integration in the United Kingdom, and we followed the biblical injunction by staging that meeting in the Land's Den itself, in the bastion of imperialism, which is described as Trafalgar Square. A lot of our fellow West Indians were rather amazed at our temerity, and we solicited the assistance of the colleagues from other parts of the world in making a bold stand on the need for West Indies integration." And he said so at the signing ceremony of the Treaty of Chaguaramas on the 4th of July, 1973. Thirdly, his belief and his faith that the people of the Caribbean could manage their own affairs. He said, "I think that the writings of Dr. Williams and the economic researches of Professor Arthur Lewis were the first faint glimmerings of the indication that the Caribbean people were capable of managing their own affairs." It was all this that led him to invite Forbes Burnham to meet with him in Barbados on the 4th of July, 1965, to discuss the possibility of the establishment of a regional free trade area in the Caribbean. Exactly 8 years later, on 4th July 1973, at the signing ceremony in Trinidad of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, establishing CARICOM, he revealed some details of that meeting, and I quote, "Occasions for making disclosures of this kind are not frequent. I can disclose that it was on July 4th, 1965, that the Prime Minister of Guyana met with me in Barbados at my invitation to discuss the possibility of establishing a free trade area between our two countries in the first instance, and the rest of the Caribbean at such time as they would be ready to follow our example." Barrow went on, "The letter which I wrote was in my own fine Barbadian hand, which is sometimes ineligible. But apparently, the Prime Minister of Guyana was able to read that letter because of he informs me, his Barbadian ancestry. In that letter, I invited the Prime Minister of Guyana to come to Barbados so that we could hold these discussions." End of quote. These discussions eventually led Barrow, Burnham, and Verboord of Antigua signing on 15 December 1965 the Dickinson Bay Agreement, establishing CARIFTA, a free trade area between the free countries with the provision for other Caribbean countries to join later. Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago quickly became involved in the discussions, and on the 1st May 1968, CARIFTA formally came into being for Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago. By August 1968, the rest of the Commonwealth Caribbean had joined CARIFTA, the precursor to CARICOM. Barrow's 1965 meeting with Burnham was therefore pivotal to Caribbean history for two reasons. First, it was the seed that germinated the Caribbean community that we are all part of 50 years later. Secondly, through Barrow's passion for Caribbean integration, because Barrow dared to hold it, despite an environment in the Caribbean at the time which had become soured by the disappointment and disillusionment and anger that pervaded the region at the breakup of the West Indies Federation. Errol Barrow stands out as the indisputable founding father of the post-Federation Caribbean regional integration movement. 50 years on, 50 years on, we have CARICOM, because the other Caribbean leaders did follow the example set by Byrd, Burnham, Williams, and himself. We have CARICOM because they too came to appreciate and accept Barrow's regional vision. It was a regional vision that Errol Barrow frequently and articulately expressed in a style that only he could. In his address to fellow Caribbean heads of government at the conferences between 1963 and 1986, that style was clear. The various themes that informs this vision, when applied to the reality of CARICOM at this 50th anniversary year, provide, in my opinion, essential guidelines for the direction that CARICOM should be following as it commences its journey into the next 50 years. There are 6 themes I propose to examine. 1, raising the standard of living of the people. For Errol Barrow, the fundamental rationale for Caribbean regional economic integration was that it would improve the living standards of the people of the Caribbean. It was this same concern that drove his social democratic revolution in Barbados. At the 3rd meeting of the heads of government of the Commonwealth Caribbean countries in Georgetown, Guyana, from the 8th to the 10th March 1965, he said, "The British government and peoples outside of our own territories fail to realize and appreciate the importance of regional cooperation, either at an economic or at a political level, for the survival and the improvement of the standards of living of the people, over whose destinies we have the good fortune to preside. Therefore, the ultimate objective of any meeting of this kind must be that we intend to improve the living standards of the people of these territories and to afford them the equality of opportunity which by birth and status they are deprived of." End of quote. And at the signing ceremony of the Treaty of Chaguaramas on 4th July 1973, he reminded the audience that the activism of the Indian Students' Union in London in the 1940s was to, and I quote, "protest against conditions in the West Indies, and indeed supporting our comrades from Africa and other parts of the colonial empire in the protest against the conditions under which our people suffered." Regional economic integration was one of the vehicles to raise the standards, the living standards of the people. Free trade and a common market were to be the cornerstone of the 2nd phase of the regional integration movement launched in 1973 as CARICOM, the Caribbean Community and Common Markets. Free trade within a common external tariff was supposed to produce positive economic growth among participating countries, and according to Barrow, the common market should provide an opportunity for our industrial and agricultural sectors to leap forward. With the necessary determination, the region's economy can become vibrant within a relatively short period of time. I said so in a statement to the House of Assembly on the establishment of the Caribbean Community, 19th June 1973. It is fair to say that in the early years of the economic integration process, interregional trade grew significantly, then tapered and stabilized by the end of the first 40 years of integration. However, it remains limited when placed in the context of total exports, as the bulk of the region's trade is still with the rest of the world. Interregional trade, which over the years has been dominated by Trinidad and Tobago, has still not grown to the extent that would dramatically spur economic development in the region. It is for this reason that Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Carla Barnett, at the 43rd Intersessional Summit of CARICOM in March 2022 in Belize, urged member states to improve on regional trade. And I quote, "Let us set a target to lift interregional trade out of the doldrums of 16 to 18% of our total trade to 25% by 2025. In November 2022, at the 55th meeting of COTED, Dr. Barnett again said, integration is a critical platform for improvement in our trade performances, and it is trade performances that will drive the economic growth that we need. If free trade, therefore, is to be a more significant stimulant to economic development throughout the region, and therefore positively impact the lives and living standards of the peoples of the region, then in the decades ahead, CARICOM member states must make a concerted effort to dramatically increase trade by removing the outmoded barriers that still encumber genuine free trade. Therefore, there is a school of thought that believes that in the CARICOM context, the freeing of trade among member states is necessary but insufficient to obtain the gains of economic integration. It argues that it also necessitates the removal of colonial economic and social structures and production and consumption patterns that have kept the region at a low level of development. It was in recognition of the limitations of free trade for driving economic development in the region that led the CARICOM founding fathers to ink the 1973 Chaguaramas Treaty. As you know, the treaty provided for a Caribbean community and common market with three pillars of integration: economic integration, functional cooperation, and foreign policy coordination. Later, in 2001, the successors to the founding fathers agreed to a revised treaty that establishes a CARICOM single market and economy, the CSME. And according to Dr. Carla Barnett, the adoption in 2001 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas incorporating the CSME was undoubtedly a bold and unprecedented step forward in deepening our regional integration process. End of quote. However, the single market is being slowly and is slowly being implemented, well past its initial target date of 2008. A CARICOM strategic plan for 2015 and 2019 reports that there was only a 64% level of implementation of the CSME. The actions that have to be taken to put the components of the single market in place have to be taken by the governments of each member state, and there lies the problem. Governments have not been moving fast enough to give national effect to the regional decisions of the CSME. We must give priority to the realization of the single market in the shortest possible time frame. It is clear that if CARICOM is to deliver on raising the standards of living of its people, as Errol Barrow had hoped, the deepening of the regional integration for the CSME must proceed at 50 times the pace of integration during the next 50 years. We must revisit with some urgency the agreement for a single economy whose attainment is now a goal on a distant horizon. One of the key tenets of the CARICOM single economy was monetary integration, which would involve, among other things, the creation of a single currency among member states. Several attempts of this have failed over the years. It is instructive that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the ECCB, for which I'm chairman of the Monetary Council, launched its 40th anniversary celebrations last night in St. Kitts. The ECCB is evidence that a single currency is possible where there is the will and the discipline to give up a little sovereignty, in that case, monetary policy, for the benefit of all. In this 50th anniversary year of CARICOM, regional integration, it is time to make the effort once again. For in addition to its economic benefits for the region, it would give Caribbean people tangible proof of the benefits of regional integration. It is not beyond us, the successors of Errol Barrow, Eric Williams, Forbes Wernham, and Michael Manley, and inheritors of the legacy of the region's only Nobel laureate for economics, Sir Arthur Lewis. It would be remiss of me if, in examining CARICOM's record of raising the standard of living of the peoples of the region, I did not refer to the functional cooperation in CARICOM, for which member states pool their resources to deliver critical social services to the people, from cooperation in education, in health, statistics, tourism, export promotion, development of standards, public service management, culture, broadcasting and information, among other functional cooperation areas, has been a successful pillar of CARICOM's regional integration. And through well-known institutions like the CXC, the University of the West Indies, and Errol Barrow was one of the prime movers behind the creation of the Cave Hill campus. CDIMA, CAFA, the CTO, the CTO has raised the standards of living of our people. The strengthening and expansion of functional cooperation must therefore also be a priority in the years ahead. Freedom of movement. The need for the mobility of the peoples of the region in the region had been recognized by Errol Barrow as far back as 1965. At the third meeting of the heads of government of the Caribbean countries in Georgetown, Guyana, he said, and I quote, "It is only in the field of cricket that the West Indian is able to contend as a man, to give full expression to his individuality. In no other field, either social, political, or economic, has the man in the streets, has the middle-class man in his business been able to exercise their unrestricted control and to demonstrate freely their ability. What we have to do, therefore, is to translate from the field of cricket to the economic and social level of these islands the same freedom of movement, not only in the geographic sense, because as I explained yesterday, we have already transferred too many of our people with initiative to the UK, the USA, Panama, and British Guyana. Therefore, when I say that there should be the greatest possible freedom of movement, or rather, the greatest political, social, and economic mobility, would probably be a more accurate definition." End of quote. 40 years later, CARICOM leaders recognized the need for freedom of movement within the community in the revision of the Treaty of Chaguaramas to allow for the establishment of the CSME. One of the key elements of the CSME, as you know, is freedom of movement of labor. For the people of the Caribbean to be able to move freely and work and establish businesses throughout the member states. The implementation of this principle has been as labored as the implementation of the single market itself. The free movement of persons regime is based on allowing persons of certain certified skills to be able to move freely and work within the region. In 2006, the CARICOM heads first designated 5 categories of persons who would qualify for free movement. And over the years, this has been expanded to 12 as of 2022. Despite this phased approach, freedom of movement has faced difficulties as the necessary national legislation and an administrative framework to give effect to the principle has run into delays in several member states. There is still a fear in some countries that they would be adversely affected by freedom of movement. In October 2011, here in Barbados, at the David Thompson Memorial Lecture, the Prime Minister of Dominica, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, addressed this apprehension, and I quote, "The community is losing its skills to the rest of the world and is in a global competition for scarce skills. Member states should not continue to hold on to the unreasonable fears or hostility towards other CARICOM nationals. The statistics reveal an unexpected picture. A comprehensive migration and free movement study conducted by the CARICOM Secretariat in the period June 2009 to June 2010 showed that approximately 4,500 persons moved through the skills regime in the period 1997 to June 2010. In spite of these low figures, there are persistent rumors that countries are being flooded by CARICOM nationals. The same study provided that in the period 2000 to June 2010, an estimated 85,000 work permits were issued by member states, of which 63,750 were issued to nationals of third countries. By third countries, we mean nationals who are not CARICOM citizens. These findings clearly highlight that the main movers in our community in the past decade have been non-CARICOM nationals. So foreign nationals are finding and creating job opportunities for themselves in our region, while our CARICOM citizens do not appear to be taking full advantage of the opportunities open to them in this regard. End of quote. In 2019, a study by the International Organization for Migration found that Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana were the two countries sending the greatest number of intra-regional migrants. Simultaneously, Trinidad and Tobago also figured among the top two receivers, with Barbados, of CARICOM nationals. In 2017, 71% of the skills certificates issued were for university graduates, followed by holders of associate degrees with almost 11%. That study concluded, the CARICOM and OECS free movement regimes expand the avenues that allow people to move, facilitating greater opportunity to travel, seek employment, access social services, and establish businesses. Available data suggests that although within these regions, some countries utilize the free movement provisions more than others. In fact, the application of such provisions has manifested in a gradual increase in interregional mobility rather than in large migration movements. End of quote. In March 2022, in responding in the Trinidad and Tobago Senate to opposition criticisms of the Immigration, Caribbean Community Skilled Nationals Amendment Bill 2022, Trinidad and Tobago Foreign and CARICOM Affairs Minister, Dr. Amory Brown, pointed out the benefits to the country. And he said, our nationals have been benefiting under the categories of skilled workers identified by the CSME. These categories include musicians, media workers, sports people, and registered nurses. When the bill is proclaimed, Trinidad and Tobago nationals will be able to access 10 categories of skilled workers for free movements. 442 workers and 417 spouses of workers came to this country between 2017 and this year. In 2018, CARICOM leaders agreed that the free movement of skilled workers was to be achieved within 3 years to 2021. While there is now agreement to provide for free movement of 12 categories of workers, including agricultural workers, we are now in 2023, 2 years past the deadline, and 2023 is the 50th anniversary of CARICOM. So after 50 years of regional integration, it is time that CARICOM adopts the Errol Barrow's position, that there should be the greatest possible freedom of movement. Essentially, the requirement for freedom of movement of persons within the community should simply be proof that the person is a CARICOM national, a passport, or national ID card. This is already successfully taking place within the OECS Economic Union, whose members make up half of CARICOM. It can happen now within CARICOM. For, as Errol Barrow said in 1986, if you have sometimes failed to comprehend the essence of the regional integration movement, the truth is that thousands of ordinary Caribbean people do. In fact, they live that reality every day. We are a family of islands nesting closely under the shelter of the great cooperative Republic of Guyana. And this fact of regional togetherness is lived every day by ordinary West Indian men and women in their comings and goings, the small traders, and some not so small, who move from Jamaica to Haiti, or what I believe is their legitimate business. The same with Grenada, Trinidad, Barbados, and St. Lucia and Dominica. I should like to believe that we are all committed to the principle of mobility and people interaction. However, can we speak of freedom of movement when it's easier to get to St. Kitts by American Airlines than a regional airline? To come to Barbados, I had to that's one other show. With the unfortunate demise of LIAT, which is owned by regional governments, a huge void has emerged. Traveling around the region today has become a nightmare, both from the standpoint of high fares and reduced flight availability. It is having an undermining effect on the economic prospects of the region. This state of affairs must not be allowed to continue for much longer. It must be fixed as a matter of urgency. For years, too, CARICOM governments have also spoken of a fast ferry service between the islands, but these are yet to materialize. The issue of regional air and sea transportation must be approached from the premise that regional transportation is a regional public good, and as such, governments must invest in and finance it because it is a duty they owe the people of the Caribbean. Regional integration in the Caribbean will never be effective if the people cannot and do not have the means and the systems to move freely between the islands and to easily communicate between themselves and share their ambitions and their experiences with each other. How can we be serious about building a vibrant regional community and single market if the people who are the main participants cannot get around the region freely and affordably? Let us therefore no longer circumcise their mobility and the interaction, and let CARICOM grow on the freedom of our people to interact, to work, live, and enjoy their lives together. The food crisis. In what was to be his final address at the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting on 4th July 1987, Errol Barrow identified two weaknesses of the Caribbean community, which are still with us today and which must be resolved. If the community is to meaningfully exist for another 50 years, one was the food crisis, and he attributed his identification to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago at the time, Dr. Eric Williams, and I quote, "I should like to recall a voice and a great mentor who has never been without ideas about this danger and who tried to reverse the suicidal tendency which pervaded all our history. Dr. Eric Williams will have to be heard again and again. Whenever we say agriculture, he had a conception of food production which was regional. I quote from him on the Caribbean food crisis. Food production must be approached as a basic industry to be run on commercial lines by a corporation collectively owned by the governments of the area and making approved investments in different territories. This in practical terms means a Caribbean community market. Production must aim to satisfy not only the food needs of the local population of the Caribbean, it must also take into account the needs of the extensive tourist trade in such countries as Barbados and Jamaica, as well as the export market, beginning with the Caribbean region, Suriname, the Netherlands Antilles, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and the commercial cooperation I envisage for the production of food on a large scale must keep the needs of these Caribbean areas in mind. Dr. Eric Williams wanted to correct the preference for imported foods, which has been a major cause of our psychological dependency before and after independence. And he wanted to help make agriculture a respected occupation because we needed it to make food production a respected industry, because we cannot survive without it, and because it also required gifts of intellect and high technical competence, end of quote. I have quoted extensively from Errol Barrow's observations on the food crisis because it is as relevant today as it was then. And some would say it is even more relevant today because since that time, we in CARICOM have failed to diminish, much less solve that crisis. In 1976, CARICOM established the Caribbean Food Corporation, the CFC, as a commercially oriented organization whose mandate was to provide the production and marketing for a 1975 regional food plan. It was to promote and finance viable agribusinesses in the Caribbean. By 1999, the CFC was no longer viable and had ceased to exist. Today, CARICOM countries import US $6 billion worth of food every year to feed their people and visitors in their vital tourism industries. According to the World Bank, 80 to 90% of all the food consumed in the region comes from abroad. Only Haiti, Guyana, and Belize produce more than 50% of their own food. What is even more dire is that 40% of the English-speaking Caribbean is food insecure. A CARICOM survey in 2022 found food consumption and diets were deteriorating for 25% of the people. 25% of the respondents eating less preferred foods, 30% skipping meals or eating less than usual, and 5% going an entire day without eating in the week leading up to the survey. It is estimated that there are 2.7 million food insecure persons in the English-speaking Caribbean. And with food prices continuing to skyrocket from global inflation, fueled by the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, the food crisis in the region, more than anything else, is the most serious challenge facing CARICOM today and will continue to be if something is not done in the decades ahead. Heads of government have recognized this, and it should be recalled that last year, CARICOM held 2 major agri-investment forums, one in May in Guyana and in August in Trinidad and Tobago, to examine transforming regional agriculture through innovation and investment. It is noteworthy that the majority of heads of government attended. The food crisis in the region demands urgent and immediate action. The heads of government have agreed to increase food production by 25% by 2025. We have the land to do this. In Guyana, Belize, Suriname, and Jamaica, we have vast acreages of fertile, uncultivated land. Can the capital be mobilized to develop these lands? The regional private sector must be seized of these opportunities and act on them. We must therefore move quickly to remove whatever tariff and non-tariff barriers that are still impeding regional trade in regionally produced agricultural products. We must act rapidly to correct the inadequate regional transportation network so there can be a viable means of moving food across the region. What is perhaps most critical in addressing the food crisis in CARICOM is the need to radically change the pattern of our food consumption in the region. As I've constantly said in my country, St. Lucia, in the past year, sometimes ridiculed for it, we need to eat what we grow and grow what we eat. It was something that both Errol Barrow and Eric Williams urged in 1986. And I quote, Dr. Eric Williams wanted to help put an end to the insults he heard school children exchanging about their past. I quote, I myself encountered a group of young people to whom I was speaking and who assured me that they have no part of any agricultural program related to the small farmer and local foodstuff because commodities like Edos and Dashin were slave food. The colonel from the Confederate South has won the battle for the minds of our children. I am happy to say I don't think this will happen in Dominica, where school children are making agricultural work a normal part of their curriculum. And it is there we need to begin, in the schools. If we are going to correct this hostility directed towards the production of the food, which is the very fuel of our existence, and if we are going to help another generation to understand, while self-sufficiently may be one of the greatest forces of resistance to any form of external penetration. End of quote. That is an address to the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, 3rd July 1986 in Georgetown, Guyana. The second weakness in CARICOM that Errol Barrow identified in 1986 was communication. And he said, "What is the source of our failure? I should like to share some of my own misgivings. The first has to do with communication and the ways in which we communicate. For many of our people, the regional movement has come to mean matters which relate exclusively to trade. Who will buy my shirts and on what conditions? Whose markets will open up for my pepper sauce, my gova jelly? Who will buy my white sand and who will buy my gray sand? These are realistic questions, but we have made them the exclusive justification of our being together. And this has been a grave shortcoming. Whatever we recognize it or not, we have a cultural history, a common experience of feeling, which goes deeper and is much older than CARICOM and the negotiations about trade. We have not been able to communicate the essence and the cultural infrastructure of the regional integration movement." Barrow, 4th July 1986. He went on to call on every institution and organization to accept the challenge of communicating that the region is a larger concept than trade. It's a challenge that CARICOM itself has not properly answered or fulfilled 26 years later after Barrow issued it. Only last September, at a lecture in Barbados, the Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Carla Bennett, admitted that, and I quote, "Our inability to effectively communicate and secure broad-based buy-in for the initiatives comprising the program of work for implementing the CSME. More particularly, we have not adequately articulated our successes as a regional integration movement in a manner which motivates the demand by ordinary citizens of the community for continued national implementation of regional decisions. It is true," end of quote, "it is true that we have not made the people of the region feel the importance of CARICOM to them. Let us ask ourselves, how many take an interest in our meetings of heads of governments? Will they miss these meetings if they are not held? Will they even be aware if these meetings fail to take place? The contemporary revolution in communications, the advent of social media, for example, has made it easier to communicate, and we must capitalize on this. More resources are required for extensive communication to the people on a daily basis. But that should not be the responsibility of the CARICOM Secretariat only. The private sector has a major role to play in this also. There is need for traditional media outlets, radio and television, that are regionally oriented in their content and their focus, and to which the people of the region can tune into on a daily basis for news and information about the Caribbean community. One recalls the popular Radio Antilles, based in Montserrat, with finance from a German producer. In the mid-90s, when it fell victim to the Montserrat volcano, then there was BBC Caribbean Service with its daily Caribbean report and Sports Caribbean, which the BBC closed in 2011, after decades of broadcasting to an appreciative regional audience. It should be noted that both these services were externally sponsored. The Caribbean news agency CANA was established to increase regional awareness through a significantly higher output of regional news and information. Unfortunately, CANA has all but disappeared, and it's not uncommon for us to know more international news, more about Trump, than the happenings airing in neighborhood island 30 minutes away. When the BBC Caribbean service ceased in 2011, the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, ACM, concerned by the loss, issued a call which is yet to be answered. And I quote, "The Caribbean needs a distinctive service of high-quality news and information that is collected, distilled, and explained by some of its veteran journalists, and not a hodgepodge of duplicated copy from national media houses. Let it not be said that at a moment of adversity, the Caribbean media failed to shed consideration and looked at profit instead to create a trustworthy source of news and information. They have failed, and so the Caribbean private sector and governments should collaborate to reverse it so as to ensure that the reality of integration must become, in the words of Errol Barrow, an essential part of the consciousness of the population." Foreign policy. The Right Honorable Errol Barrow was not only a proud Barbadian patriot, but he was an ardent Caribbean nationalist, fiercely guarding the identity, sovereignty, and independence of the countries of the Caribbean. He was an anti-colonialist and anti-imperialist. This is why he declared that Barbados would be, and I quote, "a friend of all and satellite of none." This is why he drew attention, and I quote, "to the need to protect our small communities from the exploitation by undesirable influences." That is why he announced in July 1986 that my position also remains clear, that Caribbean people must be recognized and respected as a zone of peace. That is why there is a fundamental theme. I should like to think there can be no difference, and that is the absolute necessity to promote and defend the solidarity and sovereignty of the regional Caribbean family, and also the absolute obligation to discover the strategies and mechanisms which ultimately lead to unity of action in all major areas of our economic and social political life, end of quote. The pillar foreign policy coordination by CARICOM, first enshrined in 1973, in the 1973 treaty, was one of the mechanisms for unity of action in the political life of the community. This was important for Barrow because within the Caribbean Community and Common Market, and I quote, "Moreover, the region as a whole will carry more bargaining weight when confronting third parties, trading groups, and international organizations." Barrow, 19 June 1973. Barrow, Manley, Williams, and Burnham demonstrated this, and all of the foreign policy themes espoused by Barrow when on the 8th December 1982, Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago established diplomatic relations with our fellow Caribbean country of Cuba. This was against the dictates of the United States and the action of other Caribbean countries that had towed the US line. We have managed in our 4 countries, and Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Barbados, to sustain our independence to the extent that we were considered to have committed an act of defiance in October last year when we took a lead in the Western Hemisphere in deciding to open diplomatic relations with the Republic of Cuba, much to the chagrin of our regional neighbors in the north. We said so in Toronto in April 1973. This has been one of the greatest acts of foreign policy coordination by CARICOM states, for it has stood the test of time, and today, Cuba and CARICOM countries enjoy a close and beneficial relationship. Only recently, the 50th anniversary of this event was celebrated here in Barbados by CARICOM countries and the President of Cuba. Since 1982, the record of foreign policy coordination in CARICOM has been mixed. It was successful in the struggle against apartheid, in the non-aligned movement during the Cold War, and in negotiations for a new trading relationship with the European market. But it has been divided in some critical areas. There was stark division over the US-led sanctions and other actions of aggression against Venezuela and its president, Nicolas Maduro, with 6 CARICOM states visibly siding with President Donald Trump on that issue. In the decades ahead, CARICOM countries must reach for foreign policy harmonization rather than coordination. And this is based on the absolute necessity to promote and defend the solidarity and sovereignty of this regional Caribbean family. Barrow, 1986. There will be continued economic and geopolitical threats and challenges to the Caribbean as a zone of peace. But more importantly today, there is an essential threat to all of us. It is climate change, that in the battle for climate justice, the Caribbean must have one voice. It must have unity of action. Failure could very well mean the disappearance in 50 years' time of the type of island states that we are today. There is one other aspect of Barrow's position that the Caribbean must be respected, that the Caribbean must be respected as a zone of peace, of which we must recognize. The threats to peace in the Caribbean are not only external, but are also internal. Instability in one member state cannot be good for the community, and so it is incumbent on CARICOM to help solve the crisis of governance and security in Haiti today, with its humanitarian and other problems. While the community is currently in dialogue with Haitian authorities and stakeholders for a solution to the problem, there are differences of opinion as to the best approach. We must be united in our mediation efforts. We need to succeed because we owe a historical debt to the people of Haiti for their brave overthrow of slavery and colonization and their strike for black liberation 200 years ago. We must succeed because their problems have partly stemmed from a 200-year history of interference and interventions in their affairs, invasions of the country, and economic exploitation by imperialist powers. We need to succeed, if only for economic reasons, because Haiti, with over 11 million people, is the largest market in CARICOM. Further, it is reported to have huge untapped mineral resources of oil and natural gas. After South Africa, the second largest deposits of the rare metal iridium, gold, an estimated US 20 billion, copper, silver, and marble. The initiative to ensure that Haiti is a fully functional member of CARICOM must be a top priority for the community. The other internal threat to peace in CARICOM is the rising rate of violent gun crime in some of our member states, including my own St. Lucia, and more noticeably in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. Uncontrollable crime can retard the economic development of our countries and damage the livelihoods of our people. The solutions to crime are complex. However, the gravity and similarity of the current crime problem in some of our countries requires urgent and determined regional collaboration on its short and long-term solutions and for the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security. We must increase our efforts in that direction. Leadership. Finally, I turn to the question of leadership. The leadership of our Caribbean community, what can we learn from Errol Barrow as Caribbean leaders face the start of the next 50 years of CARICOM? It is universally accepted that one of the major reasons for the slow progress of regional integration in the Caribbean, despite its 50-year history, is the failure of the heads of government to implement the decisions that they have taken to further the integration process. Study after study, report after report, commission after commission has blamed CARICOM's implementation deficit for the integration process not being more advanced and have recommended improvements to its governance system. The current leadership of CARICOM has accepted this and has agreed to the latest recommendation in that regard. They have adopted the Protocol of Enhanced Cooperation, whereby a subgroup of countries can proceed to implement regional decisions at a faster pace, while others who are not yet ready can do so, when they are able to. This approach was what Errol Barrow suggested when he proposed the idea of CARIFTA to Forbes Burnham in July 1965. Heads of government have also agreed to meet more frequently by holding 6 meetings annually, virtually and in person. This is moving in the right direction, but I believe that today's leaders will be even better placed to chart the way forward if we adopt the attitudes and perspectives of regional integration that leaders like Barrow exhibited and that have brought us 50 years of regional integration. First, Errol Barrow was very frank in his discussions with leaders of the other regional governments as to the state of regional integration and what was required for it. In his address to the first meeting of heads of government of Commonwealth Caribbean countries in Port of Spain on July 22nd, 1963, just 1 year after the breakup of the Federation, he did not hesitate to convey the feelings of other Eastern Caribbean leaders who were not at the meeting and his own disappointment at what had transpired. And I quote, "In this singular capacity, therefore, my reception of this invitation has been one of satisfaction that after a short period of 20 years, the dim light of revelation of the benefits of regional cooperation has dawned upon leaders of our newly independent neighbors and friends in Jamaica and Trinidad. The reception by others not involved in these talks has been one of looking back in anger to the failures of past attempts to bring together and keep together the long-suffering peoples of the British Caribbean, an objective from which we alone have never turned aside and towards which we are even now relentlessly working. We have continued to struggle to make one of many, whilst others have succeeded only in making many of one." The last line was surely a dig at both Jamaica and Trinidad. Jamaica, which had abandoned federation, first to become independent, and Trinidad, whose Prime Minister Eric Williams had famously said after Jamaica's departure from the 10-member federation that 1 from 10 leaves 0. Barrow went on to say, "The first commitment of the people of Barbados is association with our fellow men, and governments in Eastern Caribbean, so disdained because of their size, dismissed as insignificant by journalistic phrases like Liquor 8 or Liquor 7, reviled because of their low income structures, are likely to be a drain on the economies of their more powerful neighbors, and discarded on the rubbish heap of colonialism. It is not surprising to this extent of disillusionment that they should view with suspicion any attempt to gain entry into their markets on the pretext of economic cooperation without the correlated liabilities attendant upon a complete federal system." End of quote. Secondly, Barrow was bold. With the waters of the Caribbean Sea still awash with the fallout and rancor from the breakup of the Federation, he dared to invite Burnham of Guyana to discuss the launching of a free trade area while still railing against those whom he considered had failed the Federation. CARICOM leaders today must be just as bold in the decision-making and the actions on integration. Thirdly, Errol Barrow was an integrationist to the bone, and he approached the task of regional integration not as Prime Minister, whose business was to demonstrate the fact of being Prime Minister, but he did so as a Caribbean citizen who put the region first. And he was not the only one doing so, as he explained in the inauguration of CARICOM on 4th July 1973 at Chaguaramas. To me, this is the end of a long journey. Neither one of us, either the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Prime Minister of Guyana, or I, had any ambitions to be prime ministers. We had ambitions at that time to see the Caribbean integrated. Today, I heard a young aspiring political contenders stating that they want to be prime ministers, as if being a prime minister is like taking an examination, and once you achieve the pass mark, you are automatically a prime minister. I can now say that, remembering what took place in Kingston, Jamaica, none of the four of us set out to be prime ministers. The distinguished Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago did not even want to be a politician. End of quote. In the business of CARICOM regional integration, those honorable gentlemen were integrationists and people first, and prime ministers after. As CARICOM ends the first 50 years of regional integration, I urge all of us, leaders and citizens alike, to adopt the approach of Errol, Barrow, and the other leaders, that in this journey, the only goal must be to see the Caribbean fully integrated, so that in 50 years' time, CARICOM will not have gone, but CARICOM would have become not a community of states, but a truly integrated community of the peoples of the Caribbean, economically prosperous, socially advanced, culturally confident, and proudly independent. I thank you.
Prime Minister, as you spoke, the startling headlines that I read recently of the fading revolution in Cuba and the forgotten history of Haiti came to mind, and the words of Robert Nesta Marley, OM, as he said, "A people without a knowledge of the history is like a tree without roots." Tonight, you spoke with romantic monologue that refreshed and reminded us of an era in Caribbean history when those early pioneers determined that we should be satellites of none but friends of all. Thank you for reminding us of the Treaty of Chaguaramas and informing us and educating us about CARICOM and the need for Caribbean unity, part of the unity of which meant that that move was made to allow Caribbean peoples, artisans, and like the person who will come next, artists, to travel freely in the region and perform. And indeed, this next performer is one who's traveled through the Caribbean and has preached the gospel in song, as she has at events such as Gospel Fest right here in Barbados, one awesome day. She's accompanied this evening by her friends, keyboardist Neil Skeet and vocalists Cynthia Clark and Magnell Butcher. She's a performer in the National Calypso Tents, as well as she is the worship leader at her church. Very versatile, very dynamic. We want you, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome on stage Sammy, or Sammy Jane, Samantha Williams.
Don't believe he's brought me this far. to leave me. Never said there won't be trials. Never said I wouldn't fall. Never said that everything would go the way I wanted to go. But when my back is against the wall and it seems all hope is gone, I will lift my hands up to the sky and say, help me to be strong. For I just can't give up now, 'cause I come too far from where I started from. And nobody told me that the road would be easy, and I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me. I know you didn't bring me out here to leave me lonely, even when I can't see clearly. I know that you are with me, so I just can't give up now. 'Cause I've come too far from where I'm started from. And nobody told me that this road would be easy. Oh, I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me. And nobody told me that the road would be easy. And I don't believe he's brought me this far to leave me. Thank you. The next song we're going to sing for you is called Thank You, because we're thanking God for everything that He has done for us. Amen. You could clap your hands and join with us. Lord, when I look at where you brought me from and where we are today, I want to say thank you. And Lord, you promised to deliver us and guide us in every way. And I want to say thank you. So I want to say thank you for waking me this morning. Thank you for taking me through the day. Thank you for all of your blessings. I will never, ever, ever go astray. When it's on by the mighty King, you know He died. The amazing thing, I know that He's real. I know He's real, and my love and heart and my feelings. Oh Lord, you promised to deliver us and guide us in every way. So I want to say thank you. And Lord, I will love you and adore you. I give you all the praise. So I want to say thank you. Though the road is rough and rugged, you brought us through. When things seem down and out, you show you what to do. When the road seems rough and rugged, you brought us through. When time seems down and out, you show us what to do. Ooh, na 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 na, ooh, na 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 na, magnify His name. Ooh, na 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 na, ooh, na 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 na, give Him all the praise. Ooh, na 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 na, ooh, na 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 na, magnify His name. Ooh, na 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 na, ooh, na 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 na, give Him all the praise. When I stand and I look to the sky, I'm not looking for birds, I'm not looking for signs. I'm beholding the glory of God and the beauty created for you and for I. For I know that God is love, and we sure don't deserve what He's done for this earth. He gave us the rain, the wind in the sky, the sun and the moon and the starlight that shines. The star that shines. That's why I've got to say, ooh, la 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 la, ooh, la la la, magnify His name. Yes, I've got to say, ooh, la 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 la, and I'm gonna give Him all the praise. I'm gonna say, ooh, la 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 la, oh Lord, magnify His name. I'm gonna say, ooh, la la la, oh yes, give Him all the praise. Let's give Him praises, 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 and give Him glory, glory, glory. Give Him praises, praises, praises. I give Him glory, glory, glory. I give Him praises, praises, praises. I give Him glory, glory, glory. Give Him praises, praises, praises. I give Him glory, glory, glory. When I stand and I look to the sky, I'm not looking for birds, I'm not looking for signs. I'm beholding the glory of God and the beauty created for you and for I. For I know that God is love, and we sure don't deserve what He's done for this earth. He gave us the rain, the wind in the sky, the sun and the moon and the starlight that shines. The star that shines. The star that shines, the star that shines. Thank you.
Thank you.
I urge you to show your appreciation for the renditions by Sammy Jane. Well, it is now time for us to look to the presentation of awards, and I'd like to invite to the stage the President of the Democratic Labour Party, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, to make these presentations. They are the Pride of Barbados Awards. Known for his biting social commentary within the calypso genre, Colin Spencer's earned the respect of his colleagues and calypso enthusiasts at home and abroad. He began his career as the leader of the now defunct All St. George band, The Pioneers, with which he first went to sea in July of 1974, and where he would perform for the next 20 years. Best known for his social and political commentary, Colin has been to the Pick of the Crop finals on 13 occasions, with the highest place of second, that being in 2006. And here are the names of a few of those songs. The New Government, Bring Back Sandy, Blame the Government, Rail Conversation with Barrow, The Money Trail, Inclusion in Reverse, I Done Sing About Politicians, It Ain't Only Me, One Last Vote, I Going Where the Money Is, and If You Do These Things. Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you vocalist, guitarist, steel pan player, composer, recording artist, multilingual professional entertainer for the past 49 years, Colin Spencer, who's never been afraid to speak the truth to power, but who tonight will not get the microphone, or we might be here the same time tomorrow. Our next recipient is Walter Lionel Maloney, who's been a trade unionist for almost half a century, having joined the movement via the National Union of Public Workers, NUPW, as an 18-year-old fresh out of Combermere School, up and on. I went to Lodge, though. He distinguished himself as the longest-serving president of the NUPW from 2005 to 2015, having also served 30 years as a shop steward, a member of the National Council, and a first vice president. He remains the only president to have ever run for that office unopposed. Over the years, Walter Maloney has represented the NUPW at the level of the Caribbean Public Services Association Conferences Union, up to the Caribbean Congress of Labor and the Social Partnership. He has written and presented papers at local and regional fora and holds diplomas in industrial relations and human resource management, in addition to his training in industrial relations and labor at the prestigious National Labor College, George Meany Center for Labor, Maryland, in the United States. He's also attended the Galilee International Management Institute in Israel, where he gained a professional certificate in human resources management and capacity building. He's also had the privilege to serve on salary negotiations committees and the Severance Payment Tribunal for 3 terms. He was recognized by the Caribbean Public Service Association for his contribution to public services in the region, and by CITUSAB for his contribution to industrial relations in the public service. Today, he continues to be active in the industrial relations climate, having been one of the founding members of the recently formed Senior Advisory Group for Excellence in Trade Unionism. Ladies and gentlemen, Walter Maloney. Well, when other children were in kindergarten rolling Play-Doh, this next young man, who we are about to honor, was experiencing his first encounter with a racing circuit. He was just 3 years old when he competed in karting competitions in Barbados, and he finished second. And by the age of 5, he was representing Barbados at the Caribbean Karting Carnival in Jamaica. Today, at 19 years of age, he is the first ever Formula 3 driver from Barbados and the wider Caribbean. Imagine at the age of 19, it can be said of him that with over 16 years of circuit racing under his belt, he has consistently proven his potential and skills throughout his karting and single-seater career. His accolades and achievements would be just too much for us to list tonight. A record of 7 consecutive race wins gained the attention of the historic British Racing Drivers Club, who inducted this young man, a Barbadian, as the first driver from the Caribbean into the Rising Stars scheme. He's also been honored by the BRDC with the John Cooper Trophy as the highest placed British or Commonwealth driver. But above all the honors, he has articulated that the greatest achievement to date was winning the Monaco and having the Barbados flag behind him as this country's anthem was played. Unfortunately, or fortunately, he's unable to be with us here tonight as he is in, I believe he's in England. That's correct. And so he's represented not only by his mother, but by his grandmother as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak of none other than Zane Maloney. You know, Walter, I was tempted to ask if he was your son, but then undoubtedly the athlete who's considered the darling of Barbados. I know particularly for December borns, it must feel real good to know that she was born on December 1. She was born into this world to her mom, Chanel Williams, who had a bouncing baby girl. And from as early as her days at the Eden Lodge Primary School, she showed her athletic ability as she made her mark in the 200 meters and the 400 meter sprints, as well as in the relays. And always she was supported by her family. Later at Coleridge and Parry, and then at the Harrison College, she began to channel her ability, and by 2014, she was representing Barbados in the under-18 at the Crifta Games in Martinique, where she placed first in the 400 meters and second in the 200 meters. From then, there was no looking back. 2 first places in both events in the Crifta Games the following year let the world know that this Barbadian was a woman to watch. And by 2016, 2 more firsts in both events came once again at the Crifta Games, and her debut at the Poland World Championships saw her place second in the 200 meters in the under-20 division. But the pinnacle of her achievements to date came last year, when she caused our national anthem to ring through athletic venues as she placed third in the World Championships in Eugene, Oregon, second in the NACAC Championships in the Bahamas, and the big one, gold. First place at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, England, where she competed in her pet event, the 400 meters. Asked what she thinks about her achievements last season, the 25-year-old says that it's a long-lasting significance for the next generation of athletes in Barbados. Tonight, we honor the darling of the track, Shade Williams. Okay, I hadn't been told that Shade was not here, but I'm certain that her fleet-footed ways have her somewhere taking off like a jet plane. And now, Mummy, turn to the audience. To be honest with you, the two of them look so close in age, I didn't know who was who. Thank you, Miss Williams, for the gift of your daughter to Barbados. You know, President, one of the most impactful times of any speech came when the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow said, "Look at your mirror image." And I urge any of you who have not read or heard that to seek it out. Tonight, the Mirror Image Award goes to a man who, like Errol Barrow, was born in a small community in the north of this island in St. Lucie. This outstanding Barbadian is known to one and all through his professional achievements as a member of what then was the Royal Barbados Police Force, which he joined in 1969. During his 40-year service, he received specialized training at the FBI National Academy in the United States of America, at Scotland Yard in England, among others. He's a trained hostage negotiator. During his tenure at the RBPF, he served as an instructor at the Regional Police Training School and was also head of the Criminal Investigation Division, the head of the Fraud Squad, and the commander of the Bridgetown Division, among other posts. A recipient of the Barbados Service Star in recognition of meritorious work in policing, he reached the rank of Senior Superintendent of Police before retiring in January of 2011, having given more than 40 years of continuous service to his country. A St. Lucie citizen through and through, he has been involved in lifelong community service, especially as a dedicated member of St. Clement's Anglican Church from childhood to the present. He often coordinates fundraising ventures to secure resources for that church and to provide for persons in need. After his retirement, he joined the Democratic Labour Party as a member of the St. Lucie branch, where he served as treasurer for a number of years. During the past year, he assisted the General Secretary of the DLP in spearheading the refurbishment of party headquarters through fundraising and donations, a project which is now complete. Currently, he is the chair of a St. Lucie branch committee responsible for the construction of a house for a constituent who lost her home and contents in a fire, and he looks forward to many more years of continued service as a proud Barbadian. We welcome and we present the Mirror Image Award to Morgan MacDonald Graves. I thank you too, Mr. Graves, because I was kept out of trouble because there's people like you who were always in my father's house. Prime Minister, thank you very much this evening. I'd like to borrow from some of the words of the Barbados National Anthem, and they are to write your names on history's page with great expectations, because I'm certain that through your guidance, you will guide the sons and daughters of St. Lucia, the Helling of the West Indies, to their highest heights. Thank you. And a man truly versed in vote of thanks is my good mentor, Steve Blackett, General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party, who will now move the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. A very good evening to everyone here. The protocols and acknowledgements before establish, I too adopt them. Before I begin the vote of thanks, let me specially acknowledge the members of the Barrow and O'Neill families who are here with us this evening. The honor of moving the vote of thanks falls to me, and first and foremost, we must thank God for an excellent evening and an excellent event. Our sincerest thanks and gratitude to our treasured guest lecturer, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, for his comprehensive and thought-provoking analysis of the subject matter of Barrow, Champion of CARICOM, the next 50 years. We thank you so much, sir, for facilitating our party and participating in this calendar event when we celebrate our founding father, father of independence and national hero. Our thanks also to Comrade Matthew Thorne, who is now becoming very much our resident parson or chaplain. Thank you for her inspiring welcome address. We also thank our very own Mrs. Irene Sandyford Garner. Our gratitude is extended to the principal of the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, Professor Clive Landis, for his remarks and for also accommodating us here at the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination. To our president, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, as usual, much appreciation to you for your remarks and introduction of our guest speaker. And also, might I add, for using your good office in securing his presence here with us this evening. Also, thank you, Samantha Clark and her group, for her renditions, their renditions, much appreciated. Congratulations and a hearty thank you to all of our awardees here this evening, our Pride of Barbados awardees, Mr. Colin Spencer, Mr. Walter Maloney, Mr. Zane Maloney, and Miss Sade Williams, and to our Mirror Image awardee, Mr. Morgan Graves. Let me also extend gratitude to the family members who accompany our award recipients this evening and everyone else who graced us with your presence here this evening. Thank you so much. I want to especially thank Mrs. Carla Springer Hunt and her team for your very businesslike and professional facilitation here at this venue. You are certainly a credit to the university as a whole. A big thank you to the caterers who will shortly be providing us with some refreshments, and also members of the media covering this event. I want to especially say thank you to our ushers led by Ms. Deborah Hines, and of course for your professionalism, the staff of our party secretariat, Sandra, Annette, Bonita, Felicia, Jabari, and of course Michael, our caretaker, for planning and executing this event. And I want to add, before you applaud, all of these workers, all of these people here are volunteers for the Democratic Labour Party. And might I add, Comrade President, sometime we should really take them to the St. Lucia Jazz Festival, where I'm sure that our host lecturer tonight, Prime Minister, I know you'll accommodate us, I'm sure, at Pigeon Island. To our Master of Ceremonies, Wayne Simmons, as usual, your professional self, excellent job as usual. It is now my pleasure, before handing back to the Master of Ceremonies, to invite you at the end of these proceedings to join us to repair, as you repair to the foyer or the reception area for some refreshments. So Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, President Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it was our pleasure having you here with us this evening, and thank you so much, and do have a good night. Mr. Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Do enjoy the rest of the evening, and God bless you, and Happy New Year. We're just going to beg your indulgence just for a moment to allow for Prime Minister Pierre just to go to the back of the room, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.